committees that we have in the room. We have the Honorable Mvoko, the MEC for the Department of Economic Development. The name is not economic development. It combines other portfolios, environment, tourism, but I choose to highlight economic development today. We also have our executive mayor, Honorable Johnson, in our midst. We have the partners from the EU delegation, Mr. Chekuti. I'm smiling because I was practicing how to pronounce his name. Myself, the executive mayor, we had a small team there, and we were debating, is it Sesuti, Chekuti? And we were able to secure some support. We also have in our midst a delegation from 3 EU member countries, France, Germany, Italy, and we're glad to have them in our midst. They will be sharing some opportunities in those countries with us later in the program. We've invited established business, SMMEs, business chambers, local government, all of those invitees are available for this engagement. The purpose of today is to engage on export trade opportunities. I could say full stop. By so doing, I mean there's nothing more, there's nothing short. We've invited the delegation pursuant to our relationship with them to share with business what are these opportunities, how to access these opportunities. So we trust that as the program unveils, that you shall engage with the delegation, ask questions, exchange contact details, make follow-ups, so that the outcome of today becomes trade, export trade activities that take development forward, both for the Eastern Cape as well as for the EU membership countries that are here. With that said, I will stop there. I do not want to overextend my mandate and start saying stuff or things that the executive mayor will say. I will stop there and invite the executive mayor to formally welcome you. Thank you.
Program Director, the Honorable MEC Mvoko, MEC for Economic Development, Environmental Affairs and Tourism, Mr. Roberto Chikutu, Head of the Trade and Economics European Union Embassy, European Union Trade Councillors, European Union Delegation to South Africa, Mr. Gqeberha, Chairperson of the ECDC Board, Board members of ECDC, Mr. Ayanda Wakaba, CEO of the Eastern Cape Development Corporation, Dr. Martin Cameron, Managing Director, Trade Research Advisory, distinguished workshop presenters, workshop delegates, the media, all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm delighted to be part of this exciting European Union and Eastern Cape Trade and Investment Opportunities Workshop held under the auspices of the ECDC here in Nelson Mandela Bay. I'd like to thank Mr. Wakaba of the ECDC for the opportunity to address this important engagement on behalf of Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality in terms of ensuring our responsibility in promoting economic development and what local economic development opportunities are available through exporting avenues and bilateral trade and investment between the Eastern Cape and the European Union. It is indeed an immense honor for the Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality to welcome the European Union delegation to the only city in the world named after our father of our nation, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. We are deeply grateful for the ECDC, European Union, and the South African government who have worked to facilitate all details concerning this important development in the Nelson Mandela Bay today. We are warmly embraced, and we embrace you, and I'm immensely honored by your distinguished presence and for taking the time in your busy schedules to conduct this workshop in the Nelson Mandela Bay with the aim to deepen and diversify European Union, Eastern Cape exports and cooperation. This is of course an important engagement, as there have been several far-reaching announcements made by the European Union and the South African government, which have a direct bearing and impact on investment and economic development, a crucial lever to address the challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. We all know that these remain massive challenges in the Eastern Cape, and therefore we must put all our energies to good use by promoting economic growth and development through the full participation of our communities, by strengthening intergovernmental relations and bilateral trade. New research commissioned by the EU shows that South African companies are missing out of 350 billion a year in export opportunities to the European Union. Under the Economic Partnership Agreement, which is signed with South Africa and 5 other Southern African countries in 2016, the EU allows 96.2% by value of South African exports into its market duty-free and 2.5% under reduced tariffs. As conversely, South Africa and other South African Customs Union members allow for 74.1% of the EU's exports into the market duty-free and 12.5% under reduced tariffs. The EPA has been a boom for many South African exporters. Mr. Robert Gqeberha, the head of trade at the EU Embassy, told a media briefing in 2021, South Africa's exports to the European Union increased by 30%, and South Africa recorded its first trade surplus of some 15 billion, with the EU since the first free trade agreement between South Africa and the EU began in 2004. As exported a lot more value-added goods to the EU than the rest of the world. About 33% of South Africa's exports to the European Union were in manufactured goods, including vehicles, compared to just 13% of those categories as a share of the South Africans' export to the world. The European Union is the world's biggest investor, accounting to 40.3% of all foreign direct investments in 2020. These created more than 350,000 jobs. Of these, 35% were investments in advanced manufacturing and vehicles, 25% in services, and 21% in wholesales and retail. This dispels the perception that the investment was mainly in mining and raw materials. There remains considerable untapped potential for South Africa to further increase exports. It is noted by the European Union that South Africa was not filling its quotas for exports of canned fruit, butter, citrus jam, frozen strawberries, and milk powder. The Trade Research Advisory investigated the potential to sell 1,175 South African to the 27 European Union member states products. There is an untapped potential of 15 billion in exports of 19 different sorts of agricultural products from South Africa to the EU. The highest potential of 84 million was in 4 citrus fruits, lemons, grapefruits, Madarians, and narkies. And the best of these were lemons, with a potential to sell 40 million rand a year into the European Union. However, the issue of carbon border tax by the EU remains a crucial issue. This is being phased in gradually to give exporters time to adapt. South Africa just transitioned to carbon neutrality, which the EU co-financed with the help to South Africa to adapt. Program Director, the Nelson Mandela Bay views a healthy and vibrant growth and development as critical to the success of the wider economy in the Nelson Mandela Bay and the Eastern Cape Province. Hence, we envisage a term in office where economic growth and infrastructure development will take top priority to raise these prospects and standing of a municipality that has the massive potential to be amongst the top performing cities in the world. A turnaround strategy is already operational in and many of our interventions over the last 7 months in office. We have given much attention to the areas where infrastructure and service delivery has been in decline over this period, and in the coming years, we will ensure that our economy is geared for investment and creating job opportunities in the sectors that have the potential to transform our economy and reconfigure the city as a global player, open for business, catapult our tourism potential, and promote and strengthen economic dynamism that will attract investments to the region through our automotive, manufacturing sector, the oceans economy, urban agriculture, tourism, ecotourism, and the promotion of the creative industry. The automotive sector is a prime example of what is possible. The recent investments by car manufacturers, Volkswagen, Isuzu, Mercedes, FAW, and Bike in this sector is evident that we are regarded as a major global player in the car manufacturing industry. There can be no question that the European Union and South Africa enjoy a very special relationship, one which continues to hold significant promise for the growth of economic relations and cooperation in key export areas. The European Union is therefore a key contributor in the advancement of our common strategy and ongoing ties that hold great promise for both our continents and cities. In doing so, we have to take consideration of COVID-19 and the global economic environment that has changed dramatically over the last 2.5 years or so. The Nelson Mandela Bay is serious about creating a viable and safe environment which make good business sense for an investor. We are proud when we say that the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro is a stable economic that is flexible and capable of competing at the global level, and are in the process of molding an investor environment second to none, and where everybody has a chance to share in its economy. We remain focused on our search to address unemployment, poverty, and equality through comprehensive and inclusive economic development and job creation. We must improve the quality of life of our citizens, especially our youth, through long-term sustainable growth. And through our IDP, we are geared to accelerate economic growth, job creation, and empowerment of our marginalized communities. It is important to highlight that the development and growth of Nelson Mandela Bay's economy depends on the ability of all stakeholders to add value and play their part to improve the region's global competitiveness and accelerate economic growth, job creation, empowerment, and poverty alleviation. Program Director, cooperative governance is key in all of this, and this will certainly help build the support, strength, and resources the municipality needs from the provincial and national spheres, municipality entities, state-owned enterprises, businesses, chambers, and the tertiary environment to help build the efficiency of the municipality. As we set out to create the required business environment, we remain cognizant that together with businesses and the community, we must think out of the box to attract investment. So we are committed to work in partnership with businesses to harness business and investor confidence and diversify of industry. We will continue to support and promote our industries of manufacturing, such as the auto sectors, tourism, retail, pharmaceutical, retail and construction industry. It remains, however, critical to develop growth strategies for labor-intensive sectors such as tourism, construction, property development, business process, and outsourcing, etc. A key strategy, opportunity of the ocean economy, which include marine transport and manufacturing, offshore oil and gas exploration, agriculture as well as marine protection services and ocean governance. We are well positioned to be a leader in the sector because we are a coastal city boasting with 2 major ports. Yes, this sector has the massive potential to catapult the Nelson Mandela Bay into new dimensions of prosperity. Tourism is another key growth sector that can bring us into the loop of our lucrative global tourism industry. We are aligning our tourism offering and projects to compete and meet world-class standards. We believe these initiatives will unlock the tourism potential of the Bay and contribute significant to job creation and economic growth in the region. Agro processing is also a key growth sector. The region is currently the hub for processing and export of agricultural products in the Eastern Cape, such as mohair processing and export. Export of agricultural products such as citrus fruits. There's a strong focus on township economy placed on the development of businesses, improvement of infrastructure, and creating links between business hub and thus create an economy township, booming with township economies. The policies we are pursuing reflects our views that the best way to encourage and to create wealth is to create an environment for sustainable growth. The Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality through its IDPs focused on these policies by creating confidence and a conducive environment for the community in the city, nationally and internationally, to ensure that the metro becomes a vibrant destination for international investment. The depth of our vision should be one that propels us to see far ahead and model our responses to the current challenges based on a collective sustainable growth. We therefore say to all our social partners that we will not be sidetracked by that which seems insurmountable. We will remain focused and take full advantage of the opportunities that are out there. We need to harness opportunity and convert that to build a flourishing and prosperous Nelson Mandela Metro and Eastern Cape Province. We urge all local exporters to take full advantage of opportunities, especially the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, comprising products that can be exported to the European Union duty-free. Clearly, we have got our work cut out, but I'm confident that the participants at this workshop are up to the task and ready for any challenge. We've already won by mere fact that we are able to converge here as a collective to seek solutions to our pressing challenges. We must therefore continuously build on this platform to see that we achieve our stated objectives through the EU Eastern Cape trade and investment opportunities. We call on you to enjoy the day, visit our beaches, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest. I thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Executive Mayor, for those loaded, should I say, for that loaded address. Mr. Chekuti, are you ready, sir? Yeah. Please come, sir.
I prefer to take the mic rather than keep it here. Is it? Good morning to everybody, welcome, and good morning to Eastern Cape and to the Nelson Mandela Metro. I'm very happy to be here with Team Europe team here in this province. And by the way, this is my third visit. I've been in South Africa for 2 years so far. It is my third visit. The first time actually was at Gqeberha. We have here somebody from Gqeberha because we wanted to visit, of course, a special economic zone, what is going on, and that's very exciting what is happening. The second time was for the tourism, and the executive major mentioned actually the beaches. Don't say too much because we have a lot of work today, but I've been to Pondoland. I did the Pondo Trail actually in April, but unfortunately April was a terrible month because there was a flooding. So we were forced actually to stop the trail after 2 days, but I'm coming back in August. So I do, and that is actually another demonstration how rich is Eastern Cape. The west side, the east side, there are so many opportunities and potential, and the beauty is stunning, seriously stunning. And now this is my third time here, and I was backing actually with the MEC that today we came with 3 member states. As you know, the European Union is made of 27 member states, out of which 22 are present in South Africa, which is quite a high number. But this time we have 3, and I will introduce them briefly. Next time we will have 22. But that is a bet we had with the executive major, with the MEC, sorry. So after this introduction, I wanted to acknowledge, first of all, the protocol, respect the protocol. MEC for Economic Development, Environment and Tourism, Honorable Mvoki, thank you very much for hosting us here. And thank you also to the provincial authorities. Thank you very much also to the Executive Mayor, Eugene Johnson, for the nice words you said. and for hosting us in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro and the city of Gqeberha. Thank you. And I wanted also to address a special thank to the Eastern Cape Economic Development Zone. Thank you, Ayanda, and thank you all the colleagues working with you, because you have been an invaluable partner, not only in organizing this, but also in all types of investment and trade promotion activities. It's very important to have bodies like yours that are responsive, that organize things, because of course things happen in Pretoria at central level, but a lot of things has to happen at local level. This is where you have the impact, and this is where things happen. I was discussing before also with you that sometimes we are caught into abstract macroeconomic thinking of things, which is important, but we need also a lot of pragmatism. Try to solve problems where they happen at local level in a pragmatic way in order to deliver what investments are for and what trade is for. So that is our intention, certainly. And also thank you to my colleagues, fellow from the member states. They will introduce themselves fully when it's their time, but I'm very proud to have Giulia Casagrande from Italy, Dirk Berg from Germany, William Pecrieux from France. I think it's quite important that Europe goes together in this type of events, because we are representing the policy side, and we are presenting also the trade and investment promotion side here today specifically. So thanks very much for being here with me. What is the purpose of the meeting today? The meeting is a bit to raise more awareness of what is this Economic Partnership Agreement, EPA. Actually, I was astounded by how well, how knowledgeable our executive major is here on the EPA. You know all the data, you have read really carefully. Thank you very much. I wanted just to make sure that what she knows is known by everybody. And the other reason so we are here today is because with DTIC, the Department of Trade, Investment and Competition in Pretoria, we are discussing, they are our natural counterpart on trade and investment, and they are always telling us we need to do more, we need to diversify more the economy, and Europe is, of course, one of the key partners with whom we can do. So we are discussing at central level, but we are very keen to go down at provincial level in this respect, and this is what is happening today. But first of all, let's not take things for granted. What is the EPA? And sorry, I need to go back to basics, because this is important. As my mother is always asking me, what do you do eventually? And I always have a huge pain to explain what I'm doing in my daily work. But how would you explain what is EPA? Can you raise the hand? Those of you knowing more or less what is an EPA, can you raise your hands, except the provincial authorities? Well, they know. But please, higher, I need to see. Okay, France, but it doesn't count. So 1, 2, 3. Who else has heard about the EPA? So how many are we here today, more or less? I think we are around 50 people, can I say? So 3 people are aware of the EPA. This is, I'm very worried, but it's a good concern I have. That means we need to do more about the EPA. And those having raised the hand, I'm looking at the gentleman there now, how would you explain what an EPA is? Can you, in simple terms, can you say? Exactly. And what is a trade agreement? I'm acting, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, you can take my job now, please. Everybody agree. Everybody agrees with that. Somebody wants to add something because you mentioned goods. Oh, we have Sam also there from Dalrad. Hey, Sam. Very good. And we have actually then a representative from the Department of Agriculture here also, and we are working very much with them as well. So you, Sam, also should have raised your hand, isn't it? Yeah, it is the legal framework governing our bilateral relations. when it comes to trading goods. Unfortunately, services and investment and other things like competition, public procurement, etc. are not included because they were not part of the negotiations. But in spite of this, the fact of having a legal framework helps. So it is actually the EPA, the Economic Partnership Agreement, is the legal framework governing the relations between the EU and 6 SADC EPA countries. South Africa, together with Botswana, Lesotho, Eswatini, Mozambique, and Namibia. Did I forget somebody? No, 6, isn't it? And it entered into force in 2016, and we are at the 6th year of implementation of the Economic Partnership Agreement. And as our colleague said, under this agreement, trade are liberalized to a major extent. You will see it here. What I wanted to, through some slides, give you a bit where we are, information of where we stand now in our bilateral trade relations against the EPA framework. Martin, after me, will tell you what more can be done. You mentioned, Mrs. Johnson, about lost opportunities. Martin will explain that. Rather than loss of opportunities, we prefer to say further untapped opportunities. It's not a loss which is actually happening as we speak because we are already quite advanced, but we can do more, and more needs to be done in the pragmatic way I mentioned before. So let me just move to the first slide. I wanted to tell you a bit where we are with investments. You heard it before. The European Union, with the 27 member states, is the investment partner #1 in South Africa. And actually, it represents a bit more than 40% of FDI in South Africa. And I think it's quite interesting to see a bit who are the top countries investing in the European Union. Simply in terms of stocks. Stocks is the accumulation of investments over the year, not a snapshot in 1 year, but over the years. So the Netherlands is a #1, Belgium is a #2, Germany is a #3. This is, I think, it's interesting, but cumulatively, of course, is the European Union. And it was mentioned also we are very much focused on high value added sectors. So the figures here represent, it's the figure for all investors, not only European, but for European, it was said 32% of FDI are in the manufacturing sector, 25% in services, and 21% in retail and wholesale. Just to say that European investments are going into high value added sectors, not really just exploitation of raw materials or basic segments. I wanted to say something also about the BBBEE compliance level, which is very important for economic transformation in South Africa. According to reliable data, which are captured in a source called Who Owns Whom, we have actually found that 27% of EU FDI have a compliance level from 1 to 4. 27%, or more than 1/4. 22% between level 5 and 9. And actually, when it comes to the specific criteria of the Black Economic Empowerment policies, specifically socio-economic development, European companies achieve a target, 88% of the maximum target for socio-economic development, 74% of the maximum target for enterprise and supplier development, and 65% for skills development. I'm quite proud to say that in terms of black economic empowerment, a lot is being done by European companies. Of course, more can be done. Next slide, then let's go to the EPA and to the nitty-gritty now. Here you see, I mentioned that the EPA is the legal framework governing the relations between our countries, specifically for trading goods. And here you see the liberalization levels. You know, when you export a good to a country, you pay a duty normally. South Africa, together with the other countries, now 90, the sum, where is the sum again? 98.7%, which is the sum of these two figures, are fully liberalized or partially liberalized. So you see that 96.2% are fully liberalized, 96.7% of EU goods to Europe don't pay any duty, as we stand. 2.5 pay still a lower duty compared to what you pay when you export to other countries, and this lower duty is phasing down in a calendar of 10 years, and only 1.3% of your exports still have to pay a duty in Europe when they are exported to Europe. Next slide, maybe. And here we see exactly what is the situation for exports. So 19% of South African exports to the world go to the European Union, and 24% of imports from South Africa, from Europe to South Africa, come from Europe out of the overall imports. So that places Europe as number one as export destination and an import origin for South Africa. So overall, 22% of trade flows between our two countries are between Europe, the European Union, and South Africa. And if you look a bit in terms of growth, it's interesting to see that exports of South Africa, in spite of COVID, they increased by 30%. You mentioned that very clearly, I'm very proud, in 2021. And imports grew by 15% actually. So, and as mentioned before, for the first time in 2021, South Africa recorded a trade surplus in trade with Europe. So that means you are exporting much more than what you're importing from Europe. The trade surplus is indeed 15 million rand, and out of the 15 million rand, 11 million rand is in agricultural product, an increase of 4 million rand compared to 2020. So quite an achievement. And also another thing that you also rightly mentioned, you did very well your homework. It's the diversification of the export basket towards Europe. It's much higher than towards the rest of the world. And specifically look at the black line, you see differences in percentages, but the black line is in vehicle and transport equipment, and Eastern Cape is exactly the clear example when it comes to that. 24% of South African exports to Europe are in this sector, compared to, what is it, 5% or 6% to the rest of the world. It's quite an achievement also in this respect. And next slide, and here you see a bit better, the diversification of the export basket. You see motor cars and other motor vehicles number one, iron ores and concentrated, etc. So 22% actually of South Africa exports to the EU are exactly motor vehicles. And then, interestingly enough, in 2021, we have seen that when it comes to blood fractions, vaccines, and immunological products, they experienced the highest growth in 2021. Of course, this was a year of the pandemic, but it shows also how quickly South Africa was able to take advantage of the new opportunities that there were in this area. And this, of course, the benchmark, the basis was very low, but the fact that they had the highest growth means that South Africa is able to pick up opportunities when there are. And next slide, of course, I mentioned trade in agriculture. That is specifically important also for Eastern Cape, not only, but also for Eastern Cape. I mentioned that export growth has almost doubled towards Europe than compared to the rest of the world. And the trade balance is actually increasing in agri-food products. And in this respect, I'm very proud to say that we are already working on different value chains. Together with Matthew here, our project and colleagues, we have been working on the natural fibers value chain, cotton, wool, mohair. We had different engagements exactly to see how producers at local level can take opportunities and create a value chain together with operators in Europe. We have also been doing a similar work on cannabis, medical cannabis. I know that Eastern Cape is very interested also in this. And Matthew, where are we with the cannabis now, Matthew? We did something with Eastern Cape already, no? And do we have in the study tour somebody from Eastern Cape? Linda? We do, yes? Oh, very good. So that means we have had a good engagement also with this province, and this is a very promising sector, in fact. And these are just two examples of how much we can do on a pragmatic level. Take specific products that are of interest to you, see how we can have better business-to-business contact, how we can build a network, what are the constraints, the impediments, go through the value chain, and let's see how we can increase actually our contacts and engagement. And next slide, preference utilization rate. Can somebody explain? Sam, come on, you can do that. Sam from Department of Agriculture. What is it? Can you explain to everybody what is a preference utilization rate? Thank you, Sam. Absolutely. I think it was very clear for everybody. This percentage actually indicates basically how much you, exporters and economic operators, are aware of the possibility of exporting under a preferential regime, because you have a different set of documents to prevent customs if you do that compared to others. It indicates your level of awareness and also how willing you are to take advantage of that. Because sometimes, for reasons that I'm not speculating here, you maybe say, no, it's not worth, because maybe you have rebates or other kind of schemes in place. But that's interesting. But what is an increase in percentage indicates an increase of awareness and of taking advantage from economic operators. 2016, 74% of trade flows were taking advantage of these preferences, and in 2021, 89%. So this is extremely good and interesting. And of course, we want to achieve 100%, because that means we are making full use of the preferences under the EPA. Now, you also mentioned that very clearly, but I think it's important to have it in writing. These are tariff rate quotas. Who knows who's a TRQ? And I don't want to ask again our friend Sam. TRQs, are you familiar with this terminology? What is a TRQ? Somebody wants to say it? Please, don't be shy. No? So, TRQs is when a product is a bit sensitive, but not too much. So, I say you can export a certain quantity without paying under any duty, but above that quantity you need to pay a duty. So, it's a tariff rate quota. So for certain sensitive products in Europe, and also the other way around, we have established TRQs, certain amounts that can be exported duty-free to the EU, and above which you pay the duty. But we have seen that these TRQs are not fully exploited in South Africa, and there are many reasons behind. We need to dig more, because it is in fact a lost opportunity. You can export duty-free, but why are you not doing it? For certain things we found out what's the reason, but we need to see more. I mentioned just some of them. We also have bioethanol and other products, but more needs to be done. So I stop here, and I think, Ayanda, we take questions later, I guess. I don't know, you are the master of ceremony. Yeah? Okay. Okay, then thank you very much again. And this was a bit a snapshot of what is happening, but the most interesting part is not certainly what I said, but what is to come. Martin is saying the interesting part. If there are questions or clarifications or comments, we are all here. that can come also later without any problem.
Yeah, Roberto, I'm interested in that slide where you were showing preference utilization rate, where you had 75 and 80 something percent, because there has always been a concern that these free trade agreements that we have and that we have secured not free. We have lost our, what do you call, our space, trade policy space in securing those FTAs or those free trade agreements. And there has always been a concern that our operators are not taking advantages of those benefits contained in those free trade agreements. But I see today that, to me, we are doing well. If the rate is approaching 90%, because recently there was a study by the so-called XA International Trade Law Advisors, where they were arguing that operators are not really taking advantages of these FTAs utilization. They are making a point that utilization rate is below 50% of all the free trade agreements that we have across the EPAs with the EU, the EFTA with the FTA with EFTA countries, Mercosur, all those free trade agreements that we have. But today we are seeing that we are doing quite good. So how did you come about with that? What is the rationale that you have used in arriving at those interesting figures of 90%? Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. The name is Jingles, and I'm from Bees and Honey Consulting. We're working as clearing agents to help the import-export community to get their commodities and documentation compliant with trade regulators. Now, we're in the process of upgrading from being clearing agents to trading houses. The purpose for that is to help SMMEs and micro manufacturers to be able to get into the mainstream economy. Now, my question to you, Mr. Roberto, this morning, sir. My question is, how do we, as the trading houses, or how do we help the manufacturers and SMMEs to be able to hop onto this wagon for the EPAs? Do we have to register on some database where the transactions can be traced, or do we just package the commodities and send them across? That's my question.
Good morning, Roberto. My question is just so simple, and it relates to a recent experience. Last month, so my name is Pagamisa George. Maybe a few of you have not met me from the ECDC. Last month, I happened to meet one of the biggest importers of citrus to the US through the Delaware port. But what surprised me is that the exporter of this citrus to the US through the Delaware port in the US was the Western Cape. As you know, maybe through your research, that the biggest producer of citrus in South Africa is Limpopo in the Eastern Cape. And that got me worried. If the biggest volumes of export of citrus would be coming through a province that is not major producer of citrus, there must be some information disconnect. As EU, do you or have you experienced a similar situation where you've got imports from South Africa coming from a non-producing province? And if that is the case, maybe what are those so that we can deal with that? Because it's more expensive to export to the US if you're exporting from a citrus less producing province than here. I mean, Eastern Cape has got about 3 ports that can export to the US, but that is the situation. But I'm not aware of that similar situation with the EU, but if that is the case, if there is a similar situation, maybe it's important, maybe we identify that and we start working on that.
Okay, yeah, I'm just concerned that if I keep the mic too close, then everybody's becoming deaf here in this room, but I will do that. Thanks very much for the questions, and I think this type of question really shows how important it is to go into the nitty-gritty, into the pragmatic side. I have a policy framework here, but then how that works in practice on the ground. And this is exactly the type of questions you are asking. Sam, for the preference utilization rate, the rationale is that our key interlocutor for this is SARS, South Africa Revenue Service. They are collecting all information concerning the customs declaration made by economic operation in South Africa when exporting to a third country. And at the same time, we are counter-checking that with the data that comes from our customs authorities in the EU. And on the basis of this, because to export to the EU, you need to use, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. You know the EUR1 certificate of origin, or any type of other commercial document where you simply indicate that what is the origin and it contains all information. So on the basis of this, we can see whether a declaration has been made under the preferential duty, and then we account for the percentage. So it's SARS plus our customs authorities, and this is how we came up. 89%, Sam, I agree, is an incredible achievement, but I would not rest until I hit 100% or 99.9%. It's important we really make full use of all this. But more important is to ask ourselves why we are not making full use of this. What are the reasons? Because if we know the reasons, then we see also what else can be done. Is it really a lack of awareness? Is it because it doesn't have economic sense? Because maybe the duty is low, etc. But that is how a legal framework has to adapt to the reality. And that's why now we are having a review discussion of the EPA with Pretoria. And in the review, we exactly tackle the issues of what needs to be done to adapt the economic partnership agreement to the new realities. So that is my first answer. The second answer to the gentleman there, you asking a question which has a lot of facets. What can you do exactly, in fact, to spread the gospel, to make understand what are the preferences, and take advantage of the specific preferences? And this is not something I can only answer on my side. I think our friends from the Eastern Cape Development Corporation are also there to help you in doing this, because we have a legal framework. So the EPA is actually 2 big books. And of course, I would say go to see the books and you will find everything. But of course, it's very technical and very long. You need somebody explaining. But there is a text, etc. But also your authorities at the provincial level are exactly there to help economic operators like you in order to see what is there and what you can do in order to explain better what needs to be done. On top of it, actually, if you want to export to Europe, well, then you need also to build a network, not only the awareness, the knowledge of things, but also a network of economic operators, retailers, etc. So there is a lot of business to business and networking to be done. And in this respect, Ayanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also doing a lot of B2B engagements to create these networks. And then we have our member states as well. I mean, William, Julia, and Dirk, they will explain better how they operate. But I mean, they are here in South Africa, but in Germany, Italy, and France, there are also authorities dealing with exports and other things from South Africa. So there is a complicated network of interlocutors, and the first thing is to be aware of that and then see how each of them can help you. That is my approximate answer. Citrus. So citrus is indeed, Limpopo, Eastern Cape are 2 major producers, together Western Cape, of citrus. When it comes to Europe, I don't have now in mind the figures of what is exactly the split, but I know that there is a lot of citrus coming also from Eastern Cape and Limpopo. I know that citrus industry currently, they are facing issues concerning logistics and ports capacity. This is why sometimes they're not using a port, which logically makes sense because it's the closest to the site of production, but they're using other ports. But I also know that in Western Cape, they have a lot of issue of capacities of ports. They were now, the Western Cape producers, thinking of using Saldanha Bay as also a hub for export of citrus. Saldanha Bay, of course, is a deep port and using a lot of minerals, and that is also environmentally problematic because there are a lot of dust and that are very dangerous for the fruits. So I know that in Western Cape they were thinking how to do that, and they are in touch also with the Western Cape port authorities. But indeed, the fact to the US, you see that everything is coming from Cape Town. But what I understood, what I didn't understood, Mr. George, is that what is going to Delaware and exporting for and recorded as being exported from Western Cape is in reality also originating in Eastern Cape, right? So that means you producers are going to Western Cape to export. And that I haven't know the answer. Maybe there is an issue of cooperative and the networks that makes it easier for producers then to export via that way, or maybe there are issues with the ports here in the Eastern Cape that are not fulfilling the full capacity. But this is certainly something interesting. The other thing about citrus in Eastern Cape compared to Western Cape specifically, I know that a lot of you producers, and you correct me if I'm wrong, are also small black farm owners. That being on a smaller scale, they are maybe sometimes less aware of the possibilities and less integrated in what is a broader network of trade of citrus. And that maybe makes it that some Eastern Cape producers are not really exporting as much as they could, but they're using other kind of sales channels. But it's an interesting question and to be investigated. Thank you. So I think I stop here now, isn't it? And let's move, if Ayanda agrees, I give you back the floor. And, but happy to engage throughout the morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chekuti. Thank you, sir. We will now move. The next item on the agenda is by Dr. Cameron. Are you ready, Doc? Dr. Cameron will share untapped opportunities for exports for the Eastern Cape province. we must find him one of those South African scarves.
Thank you, thank you. There we go. All right, morning everybody. Oops. It's nice to be here, and I've been here, what was it, Linda, 2.5 years ago last time, before COVID. It's very nice to be in PE and the wind is not blowing. I was looking at the sea this morning and it's beautiful. But then the wind will come and we will want to go away. And don't worry, I say the same thing to Cape Town as well. You know. Cape Town, very nice until the rain and the wind starts. Anyhow, bottom line is we're here today to talk about the opportunities. I want to maybe, before I start, just make some comments regarding some of the notes and comments that were made earlier. So first and foremost, Mr. George, in terms of your question, the challenge that we have in South Africa with data recorded by SARS is that it's an administrative view of the world. So when you look at the data, you may see that we report exports via the Western Cape, and it may simply be that whoever is doing the paperwork has an office or a postal code that they put on a form which is reported to SARS that uses that postal code. So as an example, you have large exporter aggregators, such as somebody like Crude as an example. They buy in fruit from the different farms and then they export it. But that fruit may come from Limpopo, it may come from the Eastern Cape, but they actually do the export on behalf of the farmers, and therefore it reflects as if it comes from the Western Cape. So that's the first challenge that we have from an administrative perspective. Secondly, we also have the issue that the companies themselves locate wherever they want. Like as an example, for Mpumalanga, we all know that the northern Natal / eastern part of the country is where the major coal exports originate from. But if you look at the data, you'll see that 96% of South Africa's steam coal is exported from Parktown, Houghton, Morningside, all in Joburg, and we know there are no coal mines there. So that's the challenge that we face in terms of looking at purely statistics and not looking at what is happening in the real world. And that's why it's important, like you guys at the ECDC, know your environment, you know your economy, and when you do look at the numbers, you need to adjust for the fact that there's a disconnect sometimes between the statistics and what happens in real life. So it's a very important question, but most of the times it's relatively easy to explain once we start tracing and looking at who's the originator of the transaction versus where's the real economic activity happening. Anecdotal, interesting, I did a study a number of years ago and we found that there were crude oil exports from Wooster in the Western Cape. Now we all know that there is no crude oil that appears in the Western Cape, and it was traced to the transactions associated with very well-known people in the game of crude imports and exports, and they simply were using their postal code for where they were living, not where the business was and not where the commodities were. So just to contextualize that. Then secondly, Roberto, you mentioned the fact that the people are up to date with the stats. I'm very glad that that's the case. I just want to also contextualize, Roberto mentioned specifically the fact that we are talking about untapped opportunities as opposed to lost opportunities. These opportunities identified are in the context of future further work that we can do to mine into more opportunity. But also keep in mind that the numbers that were quoted, unfortunately, and I'm sure some of you guys, is there anybody from the media in the room? Nobody, okay, I can speak. The media sometimes don't listen well, and they filter what they hear and they write it in a way that they perceive it to be without actually fact-checking. So in the discussions that we've had, we made it very clear to them, but not all, people filter things out. Those numbers that you are seeing are potential theoretical numbers. Remember, for us to suddenly move to 350 billion rands worth of exports in 1 year or overnight, that's not going to happen in anybody's lifetime. So we explained that that is the potential that's sitting there. How we utilize it, how fast or how slow we work on making use of that opportunity will all depend on the practicalities of business and the environment and whatever else happens in the world. So if we were to go and try and utilize some of those opportunities, newbies. Maybe we'll get 1% of it in 2 or 3 or 5 years' time. Maybe we'll get 10% of it. The point is, it will be more than what we currently have. And that's the important message that we're missing in these discussions. So I'm going to talk about those numbers at the end again. But keep in mind, it is simply saying there's a pool of potential, but how we realize that potential, that's up to the business people in the room. And I hope there are many. So my first question is, are there any experienced exporters in the room? Hands up. 1, 2. Oh, Linda, where's Linda? You are supposed to get the exporters here. That's the people we want to talk to. And you should talk to. Now, okay, so interestingly, you qualify yourselves as experienced exporters. So then the question is, are there any newbies, people who want to be in exports that are not there yet in the room? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's a good signal. That's good, Linda. That at least shows that we are opening up the door to new people. That's very good. And then I guess the rest are government and local, municipal, and other representatives. So next time we're going to screen you out because you're just wasting our space here. We need the exporters. Yeah, you see, it exclamated what I was saying. It's important because, be it as it may, also keep in mind that government and the EU representatives, etc., are all facilitators. They don't do the business and you don't do the business. It's our business people out there that actually creates jobs, that drives exports, and it's those people that we need to help. Now, for the people that are exporters, whom of you have and are experiencing or trading with the EU and experiencing challenges? Any of you? You know, we have them in the room today, so we have to use this opportunity. But that's our problem. That's not the EU's problem. Okay. The first time I picked this up, that there was this us and them, the EU is difficult and we are suffering as a result of that, was actually here in PE with a workshop with Agbiz a couple of years ago. And I was saying to the guys, whenever we point fingers at the EU, we must look at the 3 that point back. Most of the challenges that we face in trying to trade with the EU is us not being able to issue standardization and certificates, technical qualifications, etc. Not being able to get stuff out of the port, not being able to keep the cold chains and the standards applied through the process. And if those things are within our control, if we can sort that out, then we can go and worry about the technical. Roberto was talking about those big thick books and stuff. Every game has rules. You've got to play by the rules. If you play by the rules, then it's your performance that's the challenge. So I think it's important, and I'm glad to see and hear that in this room there aren't many people that has that challenge with the EU. But you do have the challenge with our capabilities as a country to get the stuff out and, you know, logistics, etc. So we were talking, and the gentleman from the consulting company was asking some of the questions. If we look at this chart, for those that are at the back, I'm sorry, this light is very bright, so I'm not sure how well you can see it. Internationally, the ITC, the WTO and the OECD does an ongoing study with current existing exporters that do know how to trade. So for the newbies, this is people that actually are experienced at international exports. And they asked them 12 questions, and they say, of these 12 factors, if I were to, or if you were to experience an improvement in this factor, which of these factors will contribute most to your business? And consistently, and also between large and small companies, you'll see the first item there is access to information about export opportunities. Globally, not South Africa, everywhere. As a matter of fact, in South Africa, that number is number 4. Access to information about opportunities is number 4 on the list. But within the South African context, it's very close to the others. And guess what are the more important questions that government needs to look at and what the exporters are struggling with? You've mentioned it. Transport logistics, electricity, outdated technology, and then only access to information about opportunities. But it's at the same importance level. But globally, this is a challenge. And we find that in a lot of the cases, it's simply a lack of awareness awareness and information about the opportunities that actually holds people back. Remember, in the end, people trade with people, and we have this disconnect. Even if we have the internet today, and you can Google just about anything. To Google, I can speak without this thing. I'm sure that people can hear me at the back. Is it? Oh, for the live feed. All right. So, if you go and Google and you try and get the guy on the other side of the table that needs to buy your goods, most of the times, 99%, you're not going to be successful. So that is the big challenge that most businesses faces. I have a good, I know how to transport it, I know more or less in the world where I want to go and look, but to find the actual connection, the other human being at the end of the transaction is where the most challenge lies. And that is why people like Linda and Mr. George with the ECDC team is there to help you to arrange the business-to-business networking opportunities, etc. Because if you don't close that last part of the gap, you're not going to be able to trade. Now, I always throw in a quiz, and Roberto hasn't seen this one, so I'm tempted to put him on the spot here. But let's see who. There was this gentleman. You were very, very vocal earlier. What is your name? And you are from? Ah, okay. Chamber of Business. Good. All right. So, if you look at the picture that I've put on the screen, and while we talk, it's going to change, but it may or may not change for you as an individual. It all depends. So can I ask you, what do you see top left versus bottom right? The first and the last picture. I hear sexy. That's what you see. It's typically the younger guys do see it that way. The information is the same. The information is just slightly shifted on the screen. So it's the same dots on the screen, but your brain suddenly, for some people, interpret a totally different picture. And now, if we think of the European context and the markets in Europe, if you look at the first picture, which I normally kind of associate with Donald Trump, and you look at the last picture, which, while we have the lady here from Italy, you know, it makes me think of those, you know, those statues that you have in Italy. I'm sure the Europeans will say, well, you know, Europe is the last picture, if you think of Europe. But the reality of the matter is, it's somewhere in between, because while Europe operates as a unit from a legal, regulatory, and trade perspective, we must not lose sight of the fact that they are individual markets. And the information that you see is very quickly twisted in your mind to say, because us humans like to simplify. Our brains want to simplify for us. So we are seeing a blob, and then we start thinking of this thing as a blob. And we forget that they are individual nations, individual markets, individual tastes, etc. And that is where the opportunity lies. The usual suspects, and I'm sorry for our colleagues in the room, but I'm glad that they're here, are the Germanys of the world, are the Frances of the world, and to some extent the Italys of the world. And within the European context, you'll see when you look at the trade, most of the trade is dominated with those markets. But we have a lot of opportunities to also trade with the, shall we call it, the smaller representative markets or economies within the EU bloc. And we tend, as South Africans, my experience, we tend to want to go for biggest is best always. But in trade, biggest is not always best. You want to match your demand and your supply with your capability of what you can deliver on a sustainable basis. So the other important lesson from this is exporters need to consider that who's buying from you. Those people have a job to sustainably secure a supply. If you cannot sustainably deliver, you're going to disappoint them, and people don't like to be disappointed. We are humans, we have feelings, and ultimately you're going to lose future business with those businesses. So always match your ability with the market, and biggest, not always best. Now on that point, Mr. George, you were asking the question about the utilization in terms of the free trade, or was it Sam? Was was it Sam? So, sorry, Sam. Morning, Sam. The specific reference that you made to the work and the workshop that XA Consulting was presenting, that 50% number is actually heavily skewed by the AGOA agreement. So our utilization of the AGOA agreement is very low. And if you then average and add all of these across the different agreements together, you will find that on average our agreement rates in terms of utilization is low. But within the group of agreements that we have, the EU is one of the better, if not the best utilized, the EPA agreement. So I think one must just look at the context of that particular workshop that you were listening to and the work that Donald and them presented. It was on average, we don't use our utilization rates as we should be within the cross-section of different trade agreements that we have. All right, so the study that we looked at, what were we trying to do? Well, I was trying to demonstrate to you, we were trying to look at those alternative, not so usual, not so up in your face, not so often thought of opportunities that people are not necessarily always aware of in the context of the EU and our abilities. Just briefly, I need to give you some background as to how we look at things, but we don't have that much time. I'm sure if you want to have more discussions, you can send emails, we can send you papers, you can make an appointment with Linda and go have coffee at the ECDC, and between her and Mr. George, they will also be able to explain to you how we go about selecting what we call realistic export opportunities. I'm associated with the Northwest University. We've been doing research around this topic for 25 years, and we are acknowledged by the WTO as a trade facilitation tool, the methodology that we use. So what do? We look at the demand side first. So we say, where is a country? Do they import a particular good? Doesn't matter whether they get it from us or not. How competitive is the market from a supply perspective? So we see in the research that the more concentrated an import market is, so it means that they buy from one or few supplying countries, the more difficult it is for a new player to get into that market. Not impossible, but remember, we are trying to inform the question where we have choices to make. If you've got an uncle and the uncle sits in Angola and you're going to export to Angola with that uncle, however, if you don't have that relation, if you want to look for markets and make choices, then you want to have a very systemic and well-informed way of evaluating opportunities. Our methodology is geared to answer that question. Ultimately, we then also obviously look at things like logistics, tariffs, market access, etc. And from a supply side perspective, we also look at, are we in a position as a country, not you as a company or an individual exporter, are we compared to the world relatively mature at exporting a particular product? Those products would typically be what we would define as shorter-term export promotion type of opportunities. So teams like Linda and Mr. George from the ECDC will say, well, we can, we know that we can export lemons. So if you're in the game of lemons, we've already learned a lot about that, so it's easier for us. We can do export promotion with you. Having said that, if it's a product that we are less known and less experienced in exporting, then there may be some more work required for us as a country, for you as a company, to be able to develop and export those opportunities. So we call those export development type of opportunities. And then there's also the ability to look at, we find in international research that there's a strong relationship, we call it the product space approach. It was developed by Harvard, you'll see on the screen here, the CID, Center for International Development, where they looked at all the economies in the world and they looked at all the products that are traded. So there's more than, on an international comparable basis, more than 6,000 different codes identifying individual products. And they found that over a 30-year period that they studied, that there's some kind of relationship and a natural evolution of economies' capabilities. If we, for instance, export currently asparagus, then in what we call the product space analysis, we will find that something like artichokes relates to asparagus. It requires similar soil, similar skills, similar environment to produce. So if we're not producing and exporting the artichokes, that kind of approach will point us to the fact that, oh, by the way, because we export asparagus, we can also do artichoke. And that may then help us to develop new alternative products. Obviously, the best way to do it is if you're at the company level, you do your R&D, you identify a market segment, and you're going to start developing that product. You don't need to follow this process. But as policymakers and government officials, where do we start? We've got to cater for a broad economy, for over many different geographies, etc. So these kind of methodologies are very useful to help us with doing that. Now, on the logistics side, I'm going to run because we don't have a lot of time. Just briefly, I'm not going to go through this slowly. I'll open up. The reality of the matter is that while we talk about logistics intuitively, most of us get it wrong when it comes to commercial, what we call commercial geography. And what that means is, if I ask most people, how would we move a container from the Solomon Islands to Norway? They will probably draw a line like I've drawn there, the orange line, moving through the Suez Canal. But in the real life, the guys owning the ships, providing the service, have to optimize. They also have to make a living, profits, etc. So the way that they would actually take that container is they will actually go to Busan in Korea and eventually end up 56 days later in Norway. So when you are an exporter, your container will go on the sea, on a ship, as the company who provides the service deems it best to do. But that's got implications for you. You can't guarantee that something will be there in 2 weeks when, for instance, the fuel prices are higher. Because what do the shipping companies do? They tell the ships to go slower, because that way they use less fuel. When we have challenges in the Suez, as we saw about, 12, 18 months ago, with the Evergreen blocking the Suez, they have to suddenly come around the Cape. Who's going to pay for that fuel for the men on the ship, etc.? You, the exporter, or if you have a contract that's CIF instead of FOB, then the importer, depending on. Now, what we've seen over the last 18 months is that slowly, more and more, the importers are not willing to take an FOB contract, so just delivering on ship, because they are getting more risk averse for that variance that is happening, because it's very variable due to logistics of COVID, China's reaction to that, the Ukraine war, etc. And it becomes more and more difficult for people to predict what it's going to cost to move their container. Now, just briefly, here's an example of from Central Africa, Cameroon. If we want to take a container to Maputo versus Sydney, Australia, if I on the map draw a straight line, geodesic distance, it's about 4,000 kilometers from Douala in Cameroon to Maputo, and it's about 14,600 kilometers to Sydney. So intuitively, you're going to say to me, wow, okay, so it must be cheaper and faster to get the container from Douala to Maputo versus that same container to Sydney, Australia. Would you agree? That's the logical kind of thinking. But the reality is that the shipping companies will move it that way. So your shipping, a Maersk will actually come from the east, pick it up on the way up, take it to Algeciras in Spain, it will reship it, it will go down the Suez Canal, it will then go to Oman, it will be reshipped again, and then it will go on a trampliner down the east coast of Africa and eventually get to Maputo. And that distance is close to the same distance and time that that same container will then, which they'll pick up on the different route going to Malaysia and China to Sydney. So you can see that intuitively, and that's also why I showed you the picture in the beginning, some of the stuff that we see, our brain and our experience and our context influence how we interpret things, is not so straightforward. So you need to make sure that when you do your costing, your timing, etc., that you are aware of these type of things, and ultimately, you're going to bear the brunt of the costs associated with transactions like this. But these are the kind of things that we take into consideration. I've spoken about the short, medium, and longer-term export development, export promotion type of opportunities. We distinguish those. We have also, for the government people in the room, the Department of Agriculture, Sam is here, and the DTIC were involved, and they asked us to kind of align this analysis and the information with the different master plans that are out there at this stage. So you'll see there on the right-hand side. Now, here's an example. So we know that the province has citrus that we export. Roberto has highlighted on his one slide, for instance, that citrus jam is an underutilized, shall we say, benefit that we have under the agreement. But just to make it more practical, to show you what it would look like. So first of all, we need to identify, obviously, the HS code. For people that are not familiar with it, this is a code that defines a particular product that is recorded for the purposes of tariffs and import duties, etc. In some cases, it's very specific. In some cases, it's more vague. Point is, if we look at the particular code in question here, we can see that global import demand is that dotted brown line. And we can see what South Africa supplies into the world. So on the right-hand chart, I've just removed that brown line to make it more visible that while on this line, it looks like we are not exporting anything, we are actually exporting around 1% of global demand from an import perspective. So it's not small in the bigger scheme of things if you think about it. But you can see there's a massive gap in terms of what we supply versus what the world wants. So if we then delve into that in a little bit more detail, we'll say, if we apply our methodology, there's about 42 markets from South Africa's perspective globally that ticks all the boxes of what we look at. We would call them realistic export opportunities. And within the context of the EU, while there are 27 members currently remaining in the EU, and by all looks and means what is happening at the moment, that number is going to grow again in the near future. As we see the geopolitical movements around the Russia-Ukraine conflicts, high probability. Bottom line is 11 of these markets tick all the boxes. So we look at the individual markets. We don't look at the EU as a blob. So we make sure that we distinguish which look more like Donald Trump and which looks more like those nice, smooth statues in Italy within the EU. And if we then look at, as an example, some unusual suspects that we are not used to trade with, but which are part of the EU for this particular set of products. As an example, I've pulled out the Czech Republic, just to kind of make you think a bit about alternatives. Here we see the details for the Czech Republic. That green part is what we say, what we call realistic export opportunity. How big is the slice of the pizza that we think is realistic for South Africa as a country to go and pursue in that market? And the way that we get to that is we simply look at, if we look at all the trade for all the products for all the countries in the world, you find that whenever I put one of those codes and a country in a hat and I pull that combination, if I look at who they trade with, we find that for 80% of the value of imports, in 94% of the cases, whenever I pull something out of a hat, you will find that that 80% of value is only supplied by 6 partner countries or less. So generally, trade is very concentrated from a value perspective. You may find, and in this instance, it's not so clear on the screen, but the Czech Republic actually imports jams from 80 different markets, 80. And South Africa ranks at about number 17 of their current group of importers that they obtain jams from. So there's a lot of scope for us to expand our market there, but we will find that the top 6 markets supplies 80% of that value, and those are the top 6 markets. Only those 6 countries, excluding South Africa, supplies 80% or more of the import value to the Czech Republic. So that's where we get to that value. We say the average of what they supply, South Africa can aim to also be of that size of value supplied to the Czech Republic. How that translates to you as a business depends on, obviously, your size and your capabilities and who are you trading with currently, and do you have spare capacity? Can you tap into this potential, or are you going to focus on this market and try and achieve all of that potential? So we don't want to use that as a target, but that also informs that 350 billion that we were talking about earlier. If we add all the opportunities across all the different products into all the different EU markets that we see, we get to the 350 billion. All right. So, and then also we see that within the context of this particular product, as an example, what you also need to be aware of is on the EU side. Remember, they look at their tariff book when they are importing from us, and they say, oh, when it gets here, I'm going to classify it according to and they have more detailed codes. So as an example, while we are looking at the 6-digit code, we call it the 6-digit code, it's one thing. On their side, it's 106 different things. They actually break it down in a lot more detail. But for most of those, for 40 of those, we have 0% import tariffs. Now, the devil is in the detail. For instance, one of the lines is hazelnut puree, jam, whatever, because remember, that's a very broad thing. It's not the only thing that you think of you know, lemon or orange jam. It's purees, pastes, and lots of other jams. So you need to do your homework, and you need to go and look on the other side of the equation. Most of the advanced economies, and specifically the EU, actually reports at the 8 and 10-digit detail, a lot more detail. You won't see that from a South African side. You won't see it from our tariff book, etc. You need to go and look at their information. And I think Darren is going to show a little bit of that after me later on. So yeah, just to show you, these are all the products that we qualify for at a 0 rate within that group. Now I thought, let's take another example, since we have Italy in the room and we have the Eastern Cape from a wool perspective. So here is yarn of combed wool as an example. And as a nation, we supply very little to the world. That's the world demand. Although it's not growing, and it dipped a little bit with COVID, it's very flat, it's a very large market. And on the second chart here, you see South Africa's exports is the blue line. And then you see there's a bright green line. That actually originates, in this case, Mr. George, correctly identified in the trade data as coming from the Eastern Cape. 98% of our exports of this particular product is actually produced and located in the Eastern Cape, but more importantly, is recorded as such in our revenue, SARS revenue services data. All right, and then the other thing that you can see is obviously the red line is a lot lower than the blue line, meaning we have a balance surplus. We actually export more than what we import of this particular product, interestingly enough. Now, if we apply our methodology, we see 27 of the 180 markets in the world that we have information for that do meet our requirements. Within the EU, in this case, only 9. Remember, all the EU partners are potential opportunities. Having said that, when we apply our methodology, we're just saying, well, these 9 out of the 27 is probably your most realistic bet if you have to make a choice. It doesn't mean that the ones that are not within the 9 are not opportunities. It simply means the probability that you will have success by focusing on these 9 is higher if we apply all the following knowledge and criteria that we've built up over time. And if we look at that, then I mentioned Italy in the beginning. So there's the Italian market. It's got the largest potential for this particular product within the EU group. And if we look at it over time, we see we have had very tumultuous or difficult relationship with Italy about these products. So we've traded some, then we didn't, then we trade, then we don't. And in value terms, that's just thousands of dollars. It's very little. So the point is, while we do trade with the EU as a bloc, there's definitely opportunity to go and find those dealers within the Italian context that will directly buy from us. We've shown that we can export to them. You can see there has been transactions. We do have the ability to produce and export this to other markets. Why not Italy? Other markets in the EU. So don't get kind of bogged down by the fact that we are already trading with the EU. We can trade with individual markets within the EU more and better. And then if we look at who will we face as competition there, and this was very interesting for me, Thailand. I've never seen a sheep in Thailand, have you? Or you don't associate, I mean, it's bloody hot and wet and sheep don't do well in those kinds of climates. But Thailand is one of the major suppliers because they process the raw wool, and the raw wool probably comes from somewhere else. So you can go and look at the competitive context and then figure out where do you position yourself against those competitors. What is your comparative advantage? Why would the Italians want to buy from you as opposed to from, as an example, Thailand? Just aim for the next possible. Don't aim for the biggest. Don't try and offset Poland or China in a market. If you just go to the next target and you can beat them, you're already up ahead in terms of more exports, more business. And if we look at those particular codes, which you can't read on the screen there unless you've got very good eyes or binoculars, we have 0 import tariffs for this particular product into the EU across the board. So the question is, why are we not doing more with Italy? If we add all of this together, just to give you context, then about 1/3 of our global untapped potential for products that we identify on this basis is associated with the EU as a single trading bloc. Because remember, the rules that we trade under are representative of all of those markets. And then the next single largest one is China, but they've got their own set of rules. And then the rest of Europe, etc. So our methodology has been tried and tested over time. This work has been done independent of the EU, so that's also important to understand. We do this analysis, we do this methodology, and we inform both exporters as well as policymakers, the DTIC, international organizations. The EU has asked us just to focus our analysis for the purposes of making you guys aware of the opportunities by extracting our information and directing it to these information sessions. So it's very important that you understand they don't influence our answers. And the answers show that the EU still holds the most opportunity for us to expand our exports. So we would be stupid not to use it. Now, these were the numbers that were quoted by the media, running from about 350 to 800 billion, depending on how you look at it over time. If I take out the big usual suspects, the Germanys of the world, the France and so forth, then the red numbers that you see here is about 76 billion, 50 billion, and 35 billion in the long run. And if we add that all up, that gives you those big numbers. We've also broken this down by the Eastern Cape. So this picture shows you the Eastern Cape, both in terms of economic sectors, where the opportunities are, as well as the individual countries. And there you see the usual suspects, Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, etc. at the top. But being in the Eastern Cape, being with the automotive cluster that you have here, I've taken that out. So the first lot is about 82 billion. And remember, we're not saying how long it will take. It's not in a year. It's not in 5 years. It's there. Who will utilize it? And if we extract and remove the automotive component from it, because we know that the automotive industry is very structured and much better organized, they make decisions in a different way than the general market, then that drops to still 20 billion rands worth of short-term opportunities, not even the medium and the longer-term opportunities. So there is money to be made, there is opportunity, but the devil is in the detail. Now, briefly, keep in mind that with what's happening in the world, we are interconnected, the war is affecting us, COVID, logistics, China reaction to that is affecting that. So here's a chart as an example. You'll see there on the right-hand side, I've just drawn an arrow to make it very clear. We've seen logistics costs on average in the world. Remember, it's different per route, per country, per shipping line, but on average in the world, just in the last 12 months, increased by more than 75%. In the last 2 years, since COVID started, 2019 up to now, more than 200% on average. A container from West Coast America to China used to be $3,000 in 2019. It is now $25,000. That same container from New York to London used to be $2,500. It's now $12,500. But going to Rotterdam is actually now cheaper than it was a year ago, if you move from Europe to Europe. So the devil is in the detail. It's not necessarily the fact that rates have increased as the southern hemisphere, as Africa, Southern Africa, and even Australia. There, mask now in June, I think it was the 5th of June, they cancelled 2 of their lines to Australia because they just find that A, it's not profitable enough for them. B, there's more profit to be made in the northern hemisphere at the moment for shipping companies. So as Africa and Southern Africa, we are suffering from that they're moving all the ships to the northern hemisphere and they're running between Europe and China and America and China and Europe because that's where they make more money. And there's a shortage of ships in the world at the moment in terms of capacity for containers, never mind the fact that the containers are not in the right places. So lastly, for the business people in the room, opportunity is primarily a question of an entrepreneur recognizing the value of new information. And remember that slide that I showed in the beginning with those bar charts about the survey? The biggest challenge that exporters face is where are the opportunities? That will make the most business, difference to their lives. If we look a little bit back in history, Thomas Edison, we all know, he's associated with a thing called a light or a globe. He did many other things as well. Some people say he didn't actually, you can't treat him as the father of that. But the point is, what he did say was, there seems to be more opportunity than there is ability to utilize that opportunity. And I see that a lot in trade. And the other part of what he said, what's important for you business guys is, good fortune will happen to those that are prepared, that does the work, that does look at the facts, that put their brains in first gear, don't let the pictures get confused, and make sure you actually pick the right markets based on the right information. And then in the modern era on Facebook we find, or the internet, this was Facebook, if opportunity doesn't knock, build the door. So you were asking the question there earlier, how do you help these companies? Teach them that. If the opportunity is not so obvious, go build the bloody door. How are you going to get to do business if you don't go out there and make it happen? I know the challenge for small guys, especially in international trade, is that they don't have the resources to reach out. But there are ways and means and programs. Speak to the ECDC, there are, and even the DTI if that's required, to help small and medium-sized guys as well to get into the markets, especially with the technology platforms. So I'm going to wrap up here. I'm not going to go through all this detail. You'll get the slides for those that are interested in reading it. But what I want to highlight is just, which is not so clear and red on the screen, is the devil is in the detail. You need to do your homework. If you play by the rules, if you look at the facts, there's huge opportunity. But I find that most business people are so occupied in their day-to-day work that they don't lift their heads and look at the opportunities in a systematic and well-informed way. And they rely a lot on human connection by chance, gut feel, coffee drinking, which is a good way to do business, make no mistake. But if you want to be successful, you need to be systematic, you need to be strategic, and you need to utilize information in an intelligent way. And this is what we try and help you with. Thank you.
We have to take questions. Don't go away, don't.
No, sure.
Anyone?
Doc, thank you very much for that very informative presentation. I think one thing that I want to note here is that you asked a very important question earlier on about where are the exporters. We have exporters, we have businesses that wish to export that are not exporting yet here, but more importantly, we have got a business member organization, Exporters Eastern Cape, has got the membership of the bulk of our exporters in this Cape. They are here. So what I'm saying is, it may look like maybe the exporters are not here, because if you start sending invitation to 5 that are, or in here, but others would say, why didn't you invite me? Sometimes we send out invitation through our website to advertise, but we send direct invitation to business member organization, because they know in their membership who would stand to benefit more from such platform. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that as a note. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So it's very important that the people in the room now go and spread that message, and then when we get to that, go and speak to their constituents about the EU.
Good morning, Doug. Thank you. I think, if I recall clearly, the DTIC has a database which falls part of the pavilion, where an aspiring exporter or an exporter would find a particular country where perhaps the DTIC or ECDC has planned trade missions to go to, and that information then gets provided to the participants who are therefore invited to go onto their trade mission. Now, what I find it very, very difficult now is that as an aspiring exporter, perhaps to the EU, where do I get the information of the countries that are the ones that want my product, so to speak, listed, and also information enough that they are actually importing this kind of product from various countries? That information is very critical, because if I want to sell wire mesh fencing into Turkey, for an example, which is an EU country, how many Turkish companies that actually manufacture wire mesh fencing? What's on the ground there? Who are my competitors in there? Before I actually embark on that mission to go into Turkey. That's the kind of information that I think, which is a gap that we need to get, whether it's from ECDC or it comes from the pavilion of the DTIC. So that I just returned from Germany. I want to import a machine from Germany to do wire mesh fencing. But not a lot of German companies actually sell this wire mesh fencing for German consumers, but they're selling it for outside Germany. But I want to do it for Africa. Do I have enough information from ECDC, from the DTIC to say, okay, well, wire mesh fencing is needed in Kenya, in Ghana, you know what I mean? So that's exactly where I'm saying, in order for us to understand what the EU wants and which countries in the EU actually want a particular product, where is that information can be gathered from? I think that's a comment or a question.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Very good presentation. My name is Tony Cecevich. I'm from Volkswagen, responsible for purchasing and also export. These topics are very important. For me, one point is missing. If you have now the vessels, everything gets more expensive. How you keep your 89%? Because if you have to take more money, maybe your customers will be not anymore there. And for me, this is how because the ships, we have not anymore so many between Europe and Africa, how we are able to optimize the harbors in Europe and here to save time and money. First step, to keep that level where we are on export. And for sure, we have to look for the other opportunities, but they will fail if we fail with the 89%. And for me, that is a topic which we have to touch. Therefore, I would be interested how to do that.
I think I can speak without the mic.
But they don't hear you then.
Okay. Thank you. There we go. Thanks for the questions. So first to the gentleman, I think the question that you need to pose the question to those organizations that you've mentioned, because they are funded by taxpayers' money and geared at answering exactly those kind of questions for you. They are there to facilitate your access to information as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, most business people, A, do not necessarily directly have access to this kind of research and information and the skills that goes with that. And B, they're busy trying to do business. So the bigger companies have in-house resources and research departments that do this kind of thing. So the ECDC is there to help you. The DTIC is there to help you. Just generally speaking, the DTIC, as an example, has access to our information. And if you speak to them, you can speak to me afterwards. I can give you contact information. You can contact them and speak to them. And the same goes for people at the ECDC. They are here, so speak to them. Just a warning, though, is that the devil is in the detail. So remember that while we talk generally about products, when we talk about trade information that's available, there's a big part, I call it the 80% of the work still needs to be done to do in-market research, to really understand the market, the demand, the distribution patterns, the do's, the don'ts, the regulations for a particular product. This part of the information is the first step in that strategy, just to help you identify those most probable realistic markets that you can go and investigate. But out of that, you will need to prioritize, and then you will actually need to do what we call the last mile in-market research. So that's a key part that still needs to be done. As far as the gentleman is concerned in terms of VW, I don't have an easy answer from my side for that. We know what needs to be done. It's to get it done. That's the problem. Not what needs to be done. We all know. And I was at an ambassador's lunch in about 2014-15 where one of the ex-South African ambassadors to Africa stood up with the rest of his colleagues and he said to them, if there's an Olympic game or sport or track called talking, Africa would win it every year. Because we can talk, but we can't implement. And that's where the challenge lies, is we know what the problems are with the logistics, we know what the problems are at the ports, etc., etc. The challenge is to convert it to action. And again, that's in the realm of the DTIs of the world, of the ECDCs of the world, of the, unfortunately, parastatals in the South African context. I know that there's a lot of drive at the moment to start looking at private partnership, potential developments around the ports and logistics and so forth. But there's no quick solution that I can put on the table, except we need to implement. We need to apply and put our money where our mouths are, because we talk a lot about these improvements, but we don't execute. So, I don't have a quick fix for that one. But then again, even Europe is struggling in some cases with the logistics. So, and it's a worldwide problem, especially in the current circumstances, which are so uncertain, where great events impacts not only us, but everybody. Remember, logistic systems and ports, etc., are not built to handle spikes. They are built to run on a sustainable, continuous, predictable pattern. Even in the US, I mean, it's so bad that the shipping companies don't want the containers to be taken by truck into the US to be distributed at warehouses, etc. Why? Because with logistics, the delays that they experienced, as an example, caused the companies to now stockpile, to procure more than usual. So that's the first challenge. Suddenly, the ports and the ships, etc., can't handle this increased volume of orders. Secondly, when it does arrive in the country, those companies, and I'm not sure what the situation is in South Africa, I know in Durban, etc., it's been a problem with the weather and as a result of the weather effects, but in the US, as an example, they've over-ordered, they don't have warehouse space, so what do? They store in the containers. They rather pay the fees for the containers to be stored at the harbour or other facilities and basically treat it as virtual storage. So now suddenly that container is not available for somebody else to use.
So the shipping companies, for instance, on the west coast of America got to the point where they say, no, you don't take the container further than the harbor. You come and unpack here because we want the container back so we can go back to China with that. Anyhow, so the point is just that logistics in general are not built to handle spikes, but we've got more fundamental problems in South Africa, as I'm sure we're all aware. And we are currently experiencing part of it being the energy situation as well. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just, if you allow me, Ayanda, because since we have also 3 member states here, concerning the question how you support economic operators in exporting, in taking advantage of the opportunities, of course there is a number of institutions, but maybe William, Julia, or Dirk, do you want to share your experience, how it works for European operators wanting to export to South Africa?
Yeah, for sorry. Is it okay now? Yes. Okay. So in the case of French new exporters, we have an organization called Business France. They have an office in Joburg, and they're covering the whole Southern Africa. When a new exporter wants to export to South Africa, for instance, they contact Business France, and there is a guy in the office in Johannesburg who takes over the file, make a market study, contact the potential prospects here in South Africa, make a market study in all, and then make a report to this French company, proposing them to come down to South Africa to meet with the importers, with the public sector, and then organize a mission for 2-3 days, which is the first step for them to get acquainted with the local market. They can also participate to seminars or B2B session. We did one forum last week in Joburg with French companies coming down to South Africa with a program of maybe 5-10 meetings during that forum. They can also participate to exhibition in South Africa, having a booth and welcome any visitor. So the advice I would say is that when you want to export to a country, you have to be proactive. You don't have to wait for the information. You have to make a market study, as Martin was saying, and then make the necessary steps by participating to exhibition, meeting people, and of course business doesn't come just like this. Maybe you will wait 6 months, one year, but usually it's successful because the contact we have provided to this French company are qualified contacts, meaning that these contacts have been approached by Business France, and so they have been approached by Business France, and we check with this company that they are interested to meet this French company. So in other words, we have this organization. South Africa doesn't have such an organization in France. They have a trade officer from DTI, but he's alone, of course. So I would say that in your case, when you want to export to France, maybe you have to deal with a private consultant to make this market study. I'll show you later on in my presentation. You have some information on the custom website in France, but you have to be proactive. You have to, if you don't do it in-house, you have to do it through a private consultant, and then you have to go there, participate to exhibition, meet importers, and that's the way the things have to be done. I guess that It's the same with ICE.
Hi, very nice to meet you all. Giulia Casagrande with the Italian embassy. Sorry. We have a very similar approach. We have a specific agency for trade to Italy. It's called ITA Trade Agency, and it also has an office in Gqeberha. I can give you all the details if you're interested. So I would say that a company in Italy that wants to know more about the South African market and what opportunities it has for its export, they would contact the ITA Trade Agency, either in Italy or the Johannesburg office. They would ask maybe for a sector study. And thanks to, it's called Partnership for Export, and it was a specific instrument that was launched in 2020 because of, the COVID crisis, to help companies more. A few services were offered for free to companies thanks to that initiative, and it's continuing till now. So we also have an Italian South African Chamber of Commerce to speak of South Africa. They are very active, and they also do study sectors and help specific companies to find out about opportunities in this market. And we also have missions and fairs and events that we organize here that Italian businesses can participate to, coming to South Africa or virtually. We have for example, a wine fair every year in November. We have other initiatives on textile right now, on Italian cuisine, our main areas of exports, but also on the less known, machinery, automotive. From time to time, the ITA Trade Agency organizes specific missions to South Africa to bring the companies here. It's been a little bit difficult in the past 3 years, obviously, but it's starting again. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add also that you have to work with your Chamber of Commerce, local Chamber of Commerce. Usually they have their counterparts. I mean, they have a network of counterparts in Europe, in particular in France. We have a Franco-South African Chamber of Commerce in Gqeberha. You can go through them as well. So, just like the Germans have also a Chamber of Commerce, or you have the EU as well. So information might be available with them, and assistance can be provided by these organizations.
Yeah, I think Dirk, sorry, Ayanda, I don't need to take over your role. No, I give the floor to Dirk a second. I just wanted to say also that I think my opinion is that we have to start going beyond what is purely something which is export-oriented or import-oriented. We are living in a world of value chains. So every export from one country to another one presents opportunity for economic operators in the other country as well. So if, for instance, what they explained is mainly aimed at exporting Italian or French products to South Africa, but I'm sure that for each of these products, there are zillions of opportunities for economic operators also in South Africa. So, and in terms of the value chain creation. So it's really important to start thinking much more, I think, in the broader framework of a value chain rather than simply export and import. The world is much more complex now. Sorry, Dirk. Go ahead.
No, thank you very much. Good morning. I'm skipping in from Germany. So we have the same institution like the other colleagues. So we have the GTAI, the Germany Trade and Invest, and that's working in both directions. So they are promoting exports from Germany to South Africa, but anyway, they are situated in Berlin, and they have a big portfolio on, how to say, information, sheets, brochures, what are the opportunities for countries like South Africa to invest and trade in Germany. We have the German chamber in Johannesburg also. And what we do, we have in my ministry, coming from the Ministry of Economic Affairs, we have a big foreign trade promotion program, and it consists, what you said, is trade and exhibitions, and we have these fact-finding missions from German enterprise going to South Africa, and how to say, market access opportunities, and we have at the average, before Corona, and now it's improving. We have at average 30 visits every year with South African enterprises, and these events are nice to match. Even there are opportunities for import and export. That's what I could add on that one. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the lady and gentlemen. My watch says 11:18. I want to propose that we take a tea break, 20 minutes tea break, that we be back exactly at 11:40. Let me grant the 2 minutes for settling. I must also warn that they usually say that Europeans have very little to say. They do not speak much, not the ones we have on the room today. So it looks like we may have to adjust our initially indicated completion time from 12:30 to 1:30. So if you have to make arrangements, please make those adjustments. Thank you.